Why do we think every birder should try birding on the water at least once?
What surprising questions and bold opinions did our viewers share in the comments of our spring episodes? It's time for a viewer comment review.
And what exactly is a birding barge, and why did we build one? Get ready, it's all coming up right now on Hike Hearth Birding.
And we are back. Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our segment replays that have been running on our channel for the last 2 weeks. And now that we're back from our adventure, I can fill you in on where we were, which was Bar Harbor. Dustin took us on an awesome birding adventure. Dustin, what was the specific highlight in Acadia National Park that you wanted to take me to for birding?
Oh, my favorite is always Sur Dumont Springs. It's a beautiful natural spring that comes up from underground, and it is a magnet for all the birds, and it is prime nesting season and just like fledging season for all the warblers that are up there. So walking around the boardwalks through the natural garden and the forest edge at Sur Dumont Springs is my favorite every time we go.
So we are not going to cover that in this week's podcast episode, but we do have some additional time off on our hands with it being 4th of July week here in the States. So we will be recording a little standalone video that we'll post next week that will walk you through whatever our experiences were on that little birding trip that we took. But for right now, we are going to come to you live from the field for our Question of the Week segment. So let's get to it. So this week's Question of the Week is very thematically appropriate for what we're out here doing this morning. So Dustin, my question that I wanted us to cover on this week's episode is, what is so special about birding from the water? I know it's something that you have done over the years, and I know it's something that you have recommended to fellow birders and people that you've talked to that are just getting started in birding. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, birding from the water is just more immersive. And one of the first times I took my binoculars out in a kayak, I realized the birds just didn't care that you were kind of slowly floating below them or near them. You can't move fast in a kayak and in a raft or even a rowboat or whatever. So it's fun, it's more immersive, and you can actually get closer to the birds. And often, especially in a kayak, you're down low and you're kind of at their level. So you get really good perspectives for seeing birds in a different way and for great photography too.
So what made you decide to try out birding from the water to begin with? Was this just something that came to you, or was it accidental? What was that first couple of experiences like?
Birders have a hard time not birding when they're out in nature. So when I got my first kayak, it was just a natural fit, and I realized it was a good match of two things I love to do, and you put them together, and there was an absolute synergy because it got you immersed in that thing, and before you knew it, it was like 3-4 hours gone by and you'd be texting me, "Where are you? We got to get ready for this thing." Yeah. You know?
Birding in the water versus when you're on dry land and birding. What are some of the differences in the experience? What have you experienced differently? You talked a little bit about some of the advantages, that you're more slow moving, it's easier to get closer to some of the birds. But do you see anything differently than you do from on land?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is you're obviously locked into a wetland habitat, even if it's open water versus marsh like is behind us. So it locks you into certain species, pros and cons, right? You get some species that you have a very hard time seeing from land, things like green herons and bitterns. There goes an eastern kingbird, that kind of stuff. But it also means birds that you see inland can be really hard to get, and obviously you can't follow them. Mm-hmm. So even if you see a kingfisher or something and it flies off, sure, you can paddle after it, but it's just going to fly again. So chasing a bird the same way you might be able to on foot just doesn't pay off. So you're better off staying still, letting the birds come to you, or gently paddling in the direction where you see something. So from a technique perspective, I love to just sort of, if I see a bird that I want to get closer to, take a couple of gentle, quiet strokes, glide, come to a stop, spend a minute or two, a couple of quiet strokes, and you can by being unobtrusive in the environment, you can definitely get closer to a bird, but it also forces you to spend more time looking at other stuff. And sometimes you see different angles or different animals that you didn't expect.
Are there any particular watercrafts that you prefer over others?
Yeah, I think absolutely the most accessible way is to get a kayak, because there's entry-level kayaks now, $200-$300, really accessible for most people. And if you have a local nearby body of water, you don't need a trailer, that kind of stuff. There's even inflatable and foldable kayaks now. Yeah, so then in addition to kayaks, rowboats are really, one of the big advantages of a kayak is it gets you down low on the water. You get really good angles. I like to paddle up to the mud flats and see oftentimes there's like least sandpipers and semi-palmated plovers, killdeer, turtles, green herons, all those kinds of things. And to be down low at their eye level on the water is perfect. I think kayaks are almost the perfect vessel for that. The only drawback with a kayak is you can't easily set up a tripod. But I have on occasion set up a tripod right in the cockpit over my lap so I could get good shots at green herons and stuff like that. Next, you get into smaller boats like rowboats and bass boats and stuff like that. They're a little tippier, so if you're still, you can get good pictures, but they move around in the wind, that kind of stuff. And we're just learning how to bird on our new craft here. So this is a homemade raft that we built, and it's turning out to be a perfect birding platform, just like I'd hoped.
Yeah. And I will say, if you watch the last segment of this week's podcast episode, Dustin's going to give you a little tour of what we are sitting on right now, for sure. All right, so we've primarily talked about what I'm assuming were some of the boats you would use freshwater. What about ocean birding?
Yeah, getting off of flat water isn't great in a kayak. Most people wouldn't trust their camera equipment to survive if you were dumped in a kayak on the ocean. Though I've done that safely. There's lots of good guided tours like we did in Bar Harbor a couple weeks ago. I've been on charters for puffins off the coast of Maine, which was great, smallish, 30, 40-foot boats. And I've been on big ocean catamarans for pelagic birding. Pelagic birding is a whole nother level. The great part about those is they often come with really world-class birders and naturalist guides over the PA system. A boat on the ocean is always rocking, so it can be difficult if you have trouble with motion sickness, because if you're looking through your binoculars especially, or a camera, that motion sickness gets exacerbated. And using a tripod on a boat is usually kind of a fool's errand, although on flat water, this nice stable platform is working out great.
Yeah. I will say I am someone who really struggles severely with motion sickness on boats on the ocean. I could never use binoculars if we were out on a boat on the ocean. No way.
Yeah, and of course, when you get on a bigger boat like that, you're also at the mercy of the captain and where they want to point the boat. They're usually great about making sure everybody gets a good view by turning the boat around and giving everyone good angles. But that also means you're limited in how much time you can spend on the bird or something like that. So that can be challenging, but it's usually great. Usually you get such good looks at birds you would never see another way that I think once you're birding by boat, you might be hooked.
All right, so the next question I have for you is, what are your photography tips when you're birding on a boat? I would imagine it's very different than if you're standing on nice, stable land.
It is, but some of these tips apply when you're on land also. So a lot of people, especially with a bigger camera, have trouble with camera shake if they have heavier equipment. And on land, you're accustomed to maybe bracing yourself on your knees or using the front of your car or something, maybe a fence post, maybe a monopod, those sorts of things. In a kayak, I like to either get my elbows firmly on the coamings of the kayak so that they're not up in the air holding the camera, that they're braced, or I love to use the kayak paddle right across the coaming and use that as my platform, because it really gives you like a tripod type
that's
of
smart
thing. And sometimes you can get your knees up high and use your knees too. So find out what's comfortable in your kayak. That's your go-to position, and be ready for that, because in the moment you want to stop paddling, get yourself set into your standard position, and shoot away. And then also get nice and low. Don't hesitate to lean way forward if you can, or if you have a really small cockpit, lean forward onto the front of the boat. to get down as low as you can, because the lower the perspective, the better. And that applies, even on the beach or something too. If you're shooting plovers, of course, you want to just get right down in your stomach and get a good angle for the birds.
What has birding on the water taught you or what have you experienced from doing it that way that you never would have gotten out of birding just by being a land lover birder?
Well, I think there's a lot less environmental noise out on the water, and sound travels obviously through the open space, so you can hear birds at a greater distance than you might on land. They tend to be focused on what they're doing and not care about you so much, so you see the bird behavior a little bit better. And then finally, just being in their environment and part of their environment just feels different by boat. And I think that's what I like about it the most.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask what is going to be the fun question for any birders watching, and probably for you as well. So we've been out here for how long today?
An hour and a half or so far.
Okay. What's the bird report? What have we seen? So set the stage. Where are we right now? And what have we seen in the time we've been out here?
Yeah, so we're out on the far end of the lake that we live on, which is in suburban Boston. So we've got a lot of common northeast birds. I'd say the osprey diving to the water was the highlight so far. But we've seen a number of kingfishers. We saw a family of mallard ducklings with their hen, as well as a family of wood ducks. Really young wood ducklings, actually. They were at least 9 or 10, less than a week old, maybe even just 3 or 4 day old wood ducklings. I look forward to seeing those pictures up more closely.
Yeah, so those wood ducks, we had posted video of the one nest box that's closest to our house, so it had a Wi-Fi signal for a camera. This isn't that family of ducks, right?
It's definitely not. The ducklings that we saw today were much too small to be the ones that we watched jump 5 weeks ago.
Okay, awesome. Any last thoughts on birding from the water that you want to share with our friends on YouTube to encourage them to give it a shot if they haven't already?
Yeah, and we should definitely put a shot of the mud flats over this, because in a kayak especially, you can really get in through the lily pads and up to the edges of the mud flats, and birds have excellent camouflage. So what looks like a bunch of empty muddy lily pads almost always has birds foraging on it. So scan those all the time, look for the birds you can't see, and don't be afraid of getting stuck in the mud. One of the great techniques for kayaking is to separate your paddle if you're in the mud, and you can use it like crutches to push yourself over the mud flat a little bit. And by doing that, it can also give you a more stable platform, because you can kind of park yourself up on the mud so you don't drift away, and then you're still when you're on a good bird. Or if there's a thick spot you have to get through, but you see that there's clear water ahead, you can use this method to kind of get you over the hump, so to speak.
Okay, great. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this question of the week on why you should try birding on the water, which is Dustin's. Would you say that's your favorite format?
For sure.
All right.
No question.
Awesome. And now back to us in studio for the featured topic of the week, which is going to be reviewing viewer comments from this spring. So Lynn, right back at you. Yes. Thanks, Lynn, for that interesting report from the field. And now it's time to get on to our featured topic, which is one of our favorite episodes that we record from time to time, and that is viewer comments. We like to do those at the end of every season, and about a week and a half ago or so, we hit the summer solstice. So it is time for us to look back at all the questions and comments that those of you in our audience put throughout our spring episodes. So if we focus on our segment replay video, Why Do Birds Sing at Dawn, which had been a question of the week in one of this spring's episodes, we got a comment from a friend of ours on YouTube who visits our channel from Australia. And what that person had to say was, here in Australia, our magpies, not corvids, often sing through the night during full moons, even in rural areas. At dawn, they lead the chorus and use that time to practice their mimicry. Ours can mimic black cockatoos, whistling kites, even horses. I love learning about North American birds from your videos, especially all the, what is that word?
Galliforms.
Thank you. Since we don't have many of those here. Well, I have to say to our friend in Australia, we love your comments in the comments section of our videos, because you in turn are teaching us an awful lot about Australian birds and interesting topics for us to research. But Dustin, when you read this comment from our friend over in Australia, what jumps out at you?
I loved this question because it made me do a double take. Because I for sure thought all magpies were corvids, but I was happy and intrigued to learn that they're not. And as for galliforms, yeah, I didn't realize that those weren't more common in other parts of the world, but Australia is a weird and wild place, so I guess it kind of makes sense. Those are our kind of like ground foraging birds, chickens, turkeys, pheasants, things like that. But Australian magpies, man, that's a fascinating species. Totally a different lineage than the magpies that we have here in North America. Singing through the night, especially under full moon, shows how that behavior can vary across species depending on ecology and evolution, and their mimicry sure is impressive. I've heard their vocalizations are incredibly complex, some rivaling even the lyre birds, which are wild.
So, okay, that's interesting. So, can you tell us, like, for the North American magpies, like, is there equivalent behaviors to, like, what you researched when you looked up the Australian ones?
Yeah, it's a little similar. We don't really see birds in North America singing through the night the same way, other than, like, the northern mockingbird. But the rest of the magpie behaviors are pretty similar to the magpies that we have primarily out west, like Colorado, California, stuff like that. But as for our nighttime singers, male mockingbirds, especially ones without a mate, they're notorious for singing all night, especially under streetlights or full moons. And I know you're usually asleep, but I often wake up around 4:15 in the morning, and they're among the very first birds that I hear at that time. They are definitely the most famous mimics, but there's some other notable ones in North America: brown thrashers, gray catbirds, things like that. They often imitate other birds, even mechanical noises sometimes, but it's not always tied to the dawn chorus the same way that magpie behavior seems to be. As for our galliforms, I love that they noticed that family. North America does have quite a variety: turkeys, northern bobwhite, mountain quail, pheasants, ruffs, all kinds of stuff. But it's a great reminder that some bird families are more diverse here than in other parts of the world. And I'm sure the opposite is true of other bird families as well, especially countries or places that are islands like Australia. And that is, man, a biological cornucopia of interesting species.
Yeah, I do have to say that, like, I'm not necessarily a fan of very, very long distance travel. But the more our friends from Australia post in the comments of our channel, the more I'm like, all right, do we have to think about someday going to Australia? Because I feel like there's things we could see there that we're not going to see anywhere else.
Yeah, maybe we have to do, like, a house swap for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So the next comment that we received, which was from the same episode on Dawn Chorus, this viewer had to say, I heard my very first ruby-crowned kinglet of the season this morning, and it stopped me in my tracks. However, my favorite songbird is the red-breasted nuthatch. It sounds more like a tiny honk or a truck backing up. So, Dustin, this feels like your kind of level of audio geeking out on birds. The two birds that were mentioned by this viewer, is there anything that makes them distinct?
Well, ruby-crowned kinglets are very, like, high-pitched and kind of distinctive for the notes that they hit, although their song to me is not very elaborate, but it is distinctive. Red-breasted nuthatch, however, is quite apropos. In that trip to Cerdamont Springs, I found a red-breasted nuthatch nest cavity, and it kept returning, but I wasn't able to capture it on film. But they're actually interesting to note because they kind of sound like our regular white-breasted nuthatches, which are more common here, but much more nasally and, like they say, kind of a truck backing up like a.
I love your impressions, but could we play
Yeah, we can play the real ones.
A real one?
Here is the ruby crown kinglet.
That is a really pretty call. All right.
Yeah, and I often hear them more like this, kind of a contact call.
Oh, it's so different than the other one.
Yeah.
It amazes me that birders have to understand not just like the song of the bird, but all the other vocalizations, because you could just hear that chittering noise and not hear the other one that you played. So that's a lot of information to memorize.
Right, and then this is what I heard around the red-breasted nuthatch nest.
So to our viewer, I can understand why you said it sounds like a truck backing up, because yeah, it's very similar in sound. Okay. So what about from a regional perspective? I'm not entirely sure where that viewer who commented on these birds is located in, but where can you see these birds in the U.S.?
Yeah, so they're both kind of more northern Canada boreal forest breeders, but they do come down in the wintertime. And they're both kind of nomadic a little bit and spread around depending on where the good food source is for nuts, pine cones, stuff like that. So in certain years, particularly the same years where you have like red crossbills and other finches that kind of erupt down into the U.S., both the red-breasted nuthatches and the kinglets could be more present. And I do see kinglets quite a bit in the wintertime.
Very good. Moving on to our segment replay video on when birds shouldn't be here, why birds get lost. So one of the comments that we got from a viewer after watching that video was, yes, I've always wondered about this. I'm from New England, but where I live now on a migration path, every once in a while, I'm like, what the heck was that just flew by me? Or what's that sound? So Dustin, we live in Massachusetts. Could you give me an example of a few birds from this spring that you saw coming up in the forums as birds that don't really belong here, but have actually shown up in Massachusetts this spring?
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes actually is from David Sibley, that when birds show up in a place, it might be rare, but it's not random. They show up in places that are the appropriate habitat for them, and they often return to those same places. Even if they were lost, sometimes that gets carved into their memory, and they return to them. So the first, there's actually a couple that were here this spring in the Massachusetts area. The first one I want to talk about is the black-necked stilt. This is a bird that I've only seen in California, and it's a super elegant, petite bird that's just really fun to watch. It moves almost like no other, but it's a total out-of-towner for us. They're usually found down on the Gulf Coast, the Southeast, or out west, like I mentioned. And one was spotted in Suffolk County in Massachusetts on May 28th. That was the very first county record for that bird ever. There also was one a few weeks earlier than that in one of our neighboring towns, the town of Groton, Massachusetts. And that one showed up kind of in a swale or wetland retention pond for a relatively new building that had been built. So that one was pretty interesting too. Middlesex County is more coastal than Suffolk County. So they've been here several to many times before. So not quite as notable, but a very good inland bird for us. So that kind of sighting gets birders excited, and lots of e-birders will come looking for a bird like that when it gets reported. The second one is a white-faced ibis. This one was another one that's a shocker, a western species. These rarely make it to New England. They do look a lot like glossy ibis, which is more common here, and they sometimes will hang out with those other ibises when they find them. But if you can catch the face pattern and that distinctive red eye, then you know you've got something special. So anytime you think you're looking at a group of glossy ibises, you got to pick through each one by one and look for that different face in case you get one that's different. And then lastly is a Chuck Will's widow. A lot of people in the Northeast know of a whippoorwill. Well, a Chuck Will's widow is in the same family of night jars, or sometimes called goat suckers, because it used to be believed that they drank the milk from goats.
Great.
Particularly like in Africa and stuff like that, where that behavior is more common. But a Chuck Will's widow, I've only heard, interestingly enough, down at Disney World early in the morning, sometimes off in the palm forest, you can hear them going, and they're named after the sound they make. Chuck Will's widow, Chuck Will's widow, like that. Versus the whippoorwill that we might hear in the northeastern forest, although those are sadly continuing to decline. Anyway, they're related, but it has that spooky rolling call. If you hear something weird at night or pre-dawn that doesn't match your usual suspects, that's certainly a good one to check out. And it's the perfect example of a possible, what was that sound moment? And that's what happened to me when we were in Florida that time. And I kind of went through my mental Rolodex and realized, oh, Chuck Will's widow makes perfect sense.
Moving on to episode 13. This was our winter wrap up where we went through viewers' comments it was at the start of spring, and we were going through all the winter comments that we received from our audience. So someone wrote in, another great episode. Weather is getting nice and warmer. Back to nature walks and birding. So this comment made me laugh, not because they're wrong, but I wish that had been our spring. So here in eastern Massachusetts, where we live, we've had, up until recently, 14 consecutive weekends of rain. One storm in May dropped 7 inches of rain in some places. And so although trails technically stayed open, we had a lot of very waterlogged trails this spring. So, Dustin, that got me wondering, thinking about our weather this spring, how does a lot of rain actually affect birds? Does it make them harder to find, or does it just make for some wet birding if you're out there looking for birds as a birder?
Yeah, that definitely cuts both ways, right? If you're looking for the common birds that are around all the time, they might be hunkered down during the rain and can be harder to find that way. But as soon as the rain breaks, they come out and start foraging. And that often is a really good opportunity to see birds that, if it rained for a couple days, might be really hungry and getting out, being more active. So it can help that way. It also can make finding shorebirds much, much easier, because a lot of them like really shallow ponds where they can forage for the, aquatic invertebrates and things like that. So once those retention ponds fill up or overflow, it often overflows into areas that are not filled with brush and high cover, so it can make them much easier to see. Particularly at like a lot of national wildlife refuges have ponds or salt pans that are managed for their water, but those will end up getting filled up or getting much bigger around the edges. Those are great places. Places like Great Meadows National Wildlife Refuge in Concord, Parker River National Wildlife Refuge in Newburyport, Massachusetts, and a lot of the Audubon sanctuaries that are around have features like that.
Moving on to our segment replay video on record-breaking bird migrations and nature's longest journeys. We got the following comment. Thanks, you two. Great show on the migrations of Arctic terns and godwits and redknots. They are amazing migrators. We just missed the redknots when we were in Florida. Have fun on your birding adventures. So, Dustin, so this is a 2-part question for you. Number 1, what is a red knot? And number 2, if someone really wants to catch a glimpse of them during migration, where should they go and what's their best shot?
Okay, so red knots are kind of like a medium-sized shorebird, but they're a little bit bigger than the regular plovers and sandpipers and stuff like that. Kind of chunky. They've got a shortish bill, and during the breeding season, a really beautiful rusty red chest and face. So it's easier to see that plumage when they're on their way north in sort of like April, early May, but you definitely can see them on the coast in the fall as well. They're kind of early migrants southward, so like late August, early September is really good, and that pattern is common of a lot of shorebirds. And the red knot is famous for being one of the longest distance migrators in the world, traveling up to 9,000 miles one way, all the way from the Tierra del Fuego up into northern Canada in the Arctic. So they're a really good bird.
That's long.
As I said, Delaware Bay is the prime location during mid to late May if you want to catch them on their way northward in the spring. And it's one of the few reliable, large concentrations of migrating shorebirds in North America. Sightings elsewhere, like in Florida, can be much more tricky, especially because there's so much coastal development that their populations have been forced to be a little bit more scattered as they pass through briefly, but they kind of they make hay getting north as fast as they can. So your timing has to be just right if you want to see them there. And then finally, to increase your chances, of course, using our digital tools like eBird to track sightings in real time. You'll find them on coastal mudflats, beaches during low tide, tide pools, those sorts of things. Anywhere that you might see a sanderling or semi-palmated plover, least sandpipers, those kind of birds will often be hanging out with them, even if it's just one or two red knots. Particularly in the fall migration southward, they're kind of not in as large groups.
So for our segment replay video, early spring bird arrivals, what to look for now? A viewer commented, I have to agree that coyote howling can be unsettling, especially when they sound so close. So if you saw the original podcast episode, you may remember that Dustin took me out to look for American woodcocks during their spring courtship display. It was a beautiful, quiet meadow, and it was just, what was it, like dusk? The sun had just set. And then suddenly it wasn't quiet anymore because a whole pack of coyotes started howling just out of sight. So those are coyotes. So Dustin, for anyone who has never experienced this, and I'm not talking about the coyotes, this is a birding show. Why is the American woodcock such a big deal for birders? I have seen so many videos of that bird this spring, all over TikTok, over Instagram. People just love posting this bird all over the place. So why did you drag me out into coyote country looking for one of these birds?
Well, they're crazy charismatic and kind of enigmatic. When they're on the ground, they do this like one step back, two steps forward kind of walk that's unlike any other bird. They're like comically long bill that they use to dig for worms in the ground and stuff. But they're also kind of like aloof. They'll be near people. They're kind of embedded into the American psyche. Like people call them timberdoodles from kind of like the olden days was their colloquial nickname. And people used to go hunting for them with pillowcases and just try to like grab them in a pillowcase and get them up when bird hunting like that was sort of a thing. Of course, they're protected now. So that's well, they might actually be a game bird in some places. But now it's really about seeing their crazy, crazy courtship display where they peep, peep, and then fly up in the air and twitter and circle down. It's just inexplicable how weird they are. And people, smile and see them. And they're like clockwork. Here you can start seeing them like March 20th or something, pretty early in the birding season. And if you know of a field or a woodland edge where they tend to frequent, they will be there at 10 minutes after sunset every March 20th or whatever is right for your particular spot. So it's a good one to prime the pump for the upcoming birding season too.
So for our segment replay video, 1 weekend birding challenge, how to maximize spring migration birding into 48 hours. Someone commented, everyone loves spring, but I don't mind grinding for kites in the heat of summer. Okay, so this comment came in, and I saw the word kite, and I saw the word summer, and immediately was confused, because in my world, especially in my childhood, a kite was something you flew with your family when you were vacationing on the beach in the summertime. But I'm guessing, considering the topics of our channel, that is not what this audience member was talking about. So, Dustin, do you know what they mean when they say grinding for kites in the summer actually means?
Yeah, kites are a type of raptor. There's a whole family of kites. We don't have a lot of them in the Northeast. We have them now and then and in small numbers. But they're a type of raptor. Some notable species in that family are swallow-tailed kites, Mississippi kites, and white-tailed kites. There's also snail kites that actually eat like little apple snails. And I think all the kites have like a really hooked bill that they use as a specialized tool for eating stuff, and those snail kites can use that to dig the snail out of the big, chunky apple snails. So they're really great flyers. They're beautiful birds. They make fun for watching, make for great photography, and they have that same kind of like fast swooping flight style like our tree swallows and barn swallows do, especially for raptors. So yeah, they're just a distinctive bird that's fun. I can see why this person would happily bear the heat of summer to grind for kites, so to speak.
What does that mean, grinding for kites?
It means working hard. It means putting in the work.
So basically hanging out in the field or wherever, just waiting for that opportunity to see one of these birds.
That's right. Spending that sweat equity to achieve that payoff, which is a real good look.
Okay, so our segment replay video, a bird weather puck tracks a northeast spring migration. So the viewer comment we got on this was, I'm considering picking one of these up and or setting up a bird net pie. Do you see any advantages or disadvantages to either system? The one that pops out the most to me is cost. So I actually bought Dustin a bird weather puck as an early Father's Day gift this year, mostly because I came across it accidentally online. I liked that it was developed in partnership with Cornell Ornithology, and it has strong links to citizen science efforts. So I thought it seemed like something he'd love to try out during our spring migration season this year. I didn't personally do a big comparison or weigh other options when I made this purchase, which was a gift. This is not sponsored content. So when this viewer mentioned something called Birdnet Pie in the comments, it was the first time I'd ever heard of it. Now, Dustin, you've been using the puck in our yard for about a month now? So maybe you could speak to what that's been like. And could you give also an overview of what we've learned in researching this comment from this viewer on the BirdNet Pie and how it compares, at least on paper, to what we're using?
Yeah, Pi is a small open source computer system or operating system for a small computer. Small like the size of a deck of cards, that is meant for a singular specific purpose. Like once upon a time we had a DAC board that we bought for the house that had our calendar and stuff, and it ran just a small set of programs. That was run on Pi, and the different versions or variations of Pi have taken on fruity names to sound like the dessert. So Raspberry Pi is a contemporary version of that that's out there right now. And you can use it for whatever specific purpose that you want. So certainly if you wanted a lower cost option and you're like technically savvy and like to build electronic stuff, I don't know for sure, but I really suspect that a Raspberry Pi based BirdNet software installed version of that you built your own probably be really rewarding to build on your own, a fun little side project, side quest, if you will. But it's probably not for everybody because we don't all have those sort of technical skills or desire to build our own kind of thing. But the puck is really just software that runs on a little device that's pre-manufactured for you. So if that's outside your price range, maybe Raspberry Pi is a better way to, or BirdNet Pi is a better way to go about it. You can probably do it for $100 or $200, which is maybe, $50 to $100 less than a puck might be.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think of the bird weather puck now that you've managed to use it for at least a month? It might even be over a month now.
Yeah. I like it way more than I thought I would. I knew I would like it, but I really like it. I check in on it like every day. I'll say its uptime reliability is really great. The only, not really a downside, but the only factor that impacts the uptime for me is battery life. So I basically gave up putting in AA batteries and recharging batteries for it every couple days. And I just use one of our nice big USB battery packs out there. It sits in our gazebo 24 hours a day. It runs for 2 or 3 weeks on one of those battery packs. It's always pretty much always up and active. So I check in on it every day just to see what it's been finding. I have a couple of alerts set up. So if it hears an osprey, it tells me there's an osprey being heard. So I can get outside with my camera and try to get some osprey pictures. I also have an alert set up for northern water thrush, which is a bird we could have along the shore of the lake. I've seen it on the lake a few times, but never like as a yard bird. So I'd like to get that as a yard bird. I'm not convinced it's IDing that correctly. And that's my only other comment is I do think sometimes it mis-IDs birds, and understandable, right? This is a far from exact science. But I think sometimes when I go back and I hear the birds that it's been hearing, and if I look at the time sequence, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 birds that it heard overlapping or in close sequence, and it tries to count them as a single recording and will ID that as an incorrect bird that isn't there. But not a big deal. I mean, I'm in tune with what's here. If something like that shows up and it's telling me something crazy is out there, I can listen to it because it has the recording as well. And I can say, oh yeah, that's, not a good enough recording to say for sure, or it only sounds like half of the call or something like that. But it's been really good. I like it.
And so one last question that I'll ask you on this is, we had talked about bringing it up to Acadia National Park when we were up there a few weeks ago, and you hesitated and decided not to do that, even though I thought it would be kind of cool to have it running while we were out hiking around Acadia. But you pointed out that there's some pretty valid challenges we've had with using it remotely.
Yeah, there's a couple things. So if you just take it to another place, even when it's not on your network, to be able to be uploading records in real time, it'll keep listening and record to its little memory card. And then when it's back on network, it'll upload everything. I don't think if it does that, it knows I shouldn't say that. I don't know if it has the GPS associated with those recordings so that when it uploads after the fact, it recognizes that they were recorded in a different place. I think it does, but I have to do a little research on that. And then secondly, I'd rather have it connected to my phone as a hotspot so that it can continue to upload live and in real time and be recognized. And so the research that I did about that is I have to spend a little time making it connect to my phone instead of the home Wi-Fi, and I didn't want to futz with that before we went on our trip, which is why I didn't bring it. But other people have reported, great success doing that. And I've learned from their user forums that each record, this is confusing, each record is associated with your puck, and that puck is associated with your home location. But each recording is not assumed at your home location. The recording does have its own GPS location recorded with it. So when you look at the map and it shows you the puck, it'll show you the location where it's at now, unless you have that hidden, which is understandable too. But it won't assume that everything it heard was from that location because individual recordings have their own unique geotag on it.
Got it. Okay. So our last viewer comment, wood duck jump day. Babies have hatched. This was a really exciting segment video we put out when our wood duck mama ended up with how many babies?
14
babies. So one of the comments we got on that video was, that's a great camera setup you have there and really good footage captured. So Dustin's the one who sets everything up for our Nestbox cameras and hides out on jump day to get all those clips that we shared with you. So I figured this was the perfect time for you, Dustin, to talk about the specific camera that you're using in the Nestbox and why you're using it. And maybe just a couple comments on what it's like to try to photograph a jump day for Woodbox, just to kind of, I don't know, make sure our audience knows like really what's involved in getting something like that, because it's not easy, right?
Yeah. One thing about me is I love a long game and I'm not afraid of it. It's not the case for a lot of people. I recognize that. But it's a long game in that you have to put up the nest box. You have to be willing to wait it out because it might not get used initially or every year. You have to maintain it, make sure that it's clean, make sure that it's not inhabited by squirrels at the wrong time of year, those sorts of things, so that when the wood ducks come looking for it, as soon as the ice goes away, they have to be clear, because those their breeding instinct is strong. As soon as the ice is gone and there's open water. And then I use Amazon Blink cameras inside the nest boxes near the house because I wanted a good small nest camera that runs on battery or solar and is Wi-Fi connected. Amazon Blink cameras check all those boxes. The first generation or two of those cameras required no subscription either. And you still don't have to have a subscription, but they hide so many useful features, you essentially have to subscribe now. So I did upgrade my network with a couple of newer Amazon Blink cameras, and they are a little bit better in terms of picture quality, especially the night vision, like black and white, is really, really good. They're a little bit chunkier than the last version, and as a downside, in order to get like real-time alerts and stuff like that, I think is one of the features that you have to have a subscription for. It's only a couple dollars a month, and you can toggle it on or off if you wanted to do it just during the nesting season. For our purposes, it's well worth it, but I understand why some people really don't want a subscription-based service for that. And then, so that gets us footage from inside the box, which is handy on a couple of levels. It ensures we know when a wood duck is checking out the box, that it wasn't just empty 24 hours a day. It helps me see the schedule that they have. So we did a whole segment about the timing of the hens' visits, breaks and visits, and all that, which was really fun to map out this year. But you also have to, if you want external pictures, you have to pay attention to when jump day is coming. Be ready to look on the camera every day at the right time, or the saved clips. That's where the subscription becomes important. And set up a blind where the hen either can't see you or doesn't know you're in there and is used to that. If you just set up the blind like on hatch day, so she's seeing it for the first time, it's a little bit stressful. So I usually try to set up the blind like at least a week or so in advance, so she just gets accustomed to it being there for several days. And we've had really good luck with that. I did not get external photo from a blind this year because our best box right by the house was not used. Although at the end of the nesting season, one hen kept coming back every day and checking out for a few minutes and leaving. So maybe she's scoping out for next year. I don't know. But also on jump day, the box that they were using did not have any good unobtrusive observation points. I tried setting up a ladder in some places. It just wasn't going to work. And then it was a pretty rainy, kind of crappy weather day on jump day anyhow. Not bad for the ducks, just bad for me. So we didn't get any external footage this year, but there's always next year because, like I said, I love a good long game.
Hey, everybody. Today, we want to give you a tour of Dustin's winter and spring project that he's been working on and that we are standing on right now. This is our new birding barge called Rapscallion, and I'll let Dustin explain to you where we got that name for this vessel. But yeah, that's really all I have to say, because the interesting person that you're going to want to see who's going to tour you through our barge is Dustin. So let's get to it.
Oh, hey, Hike and Hearth Birders. Sorry, I was just keeping my eyes on the skies and my heart in the wild. Welcome to Rapscallion. So my friend owns a brewery called Rapscallion. Recommend you check it out. But for years, we've been joking that it would be super fun to build a raft for the lake and call it Rapscallion. And this year, we finally made it happen. So check out my platform here. All right, so the main deck of Rapscallion is an 8x12 platform with deck boards, posts to hold the railings. All the deck boards and railings are 5/4 pressure treated decking boards. In addition, I cut in some hinges so that we have some storage wells on each side of the stern end. And inside the storage well on this side, it holds our battery for the electric trolling motor. And on the other side, we have a similar storage well that has some tools, rope, the cover for the bimini, and I've been keeping some swimming fins in there too. Next up, most importantly, is our power. So this is an electric Minn Kota 55-pound thrust, which is, it's minimalistic, but it does the job in all but the heaviest winds on our lake. So far it's been really good, other than a battery mishap, but that wasn't the motor's fault. Next, we have on the stern port side, a swim ladder. The swim ladder extends, so you just unclip it from that black clip on the left-hand side, and once you drop it into the water, the steps just extend downward, and it supports like 400 pounds or something like that. So it's been great for reboarding after a cool swim. Next up, we have the dock floats that are down there. So each pontoon has 4 dock floats, and each dock float is 4 feet by 2 feet by 12 inches and supports 450 pounds. So that's 3,600 total pounds of flotation. The framing and decking weighs 1,800 to 2,000 pounds, leaving us 1,600 pounds of flotation for cargo and passengers. The other thing that's great about this deck is it's so flexible for different configurations. So it supports birding equipment like a tripod with my camera, supports having some space for a GoPro to stand. We'll probably add some clips to be able to attach it as well when we're underway. But being able to move the seating around wherever we want, move people's stuff, coolers, life jackets, all that has been really great. Even with dogs and their life jackets on here trying to squeeze by chairs and stuff, it's been plenty of space. So it's really nice to be able to just park ourselves in a quiet space like this. You can see all the mud flats out there. And on our right-hand side, we've got some trees on the shoreline with some dead snags. And these dead snags are great for green herons, great blue herons, sometimes ospreys and hawks, kingfishers, eastern kingbirds. And today there's been lots of tree swallows and barn swallows because their babies are out of the nest and are getting fed. You don't often see them land on branches too much, but at this time of year, you do when they're feeding babies, which is really great. And being able to have the camera set up on the tripod and ready to go, so as soon as I zero in on something, it gives me a nice stable platform. It's been really handy. I look forward to new photography opportunities coming from this. All right, lastly is the bimini. So giving us some overhead shade in the middle of the day is really key. And this is a relatively inexpensive bimini intended for a traditional pontoon boat. But as long as you make the handrails at the width you need and the height that accommodates some headspace, it works out really great, especially in the middle of the day. Early in the morning and at sunset time, the bimini is a good idea, but the shadow it casts is actually off on the water at those times of day. So middle of the day, it's perfect. And that's Rapscallion, our new platform for keeping our eyes on the skies and our hearts in the wild.
Bye, everyone. Okay, so that's it for today's episode. You got 2 segments of us live in the field, and then, of course, our viewer comments section, which we thank all of you who have contributed in the comments and had conversations with us. We really, really enjoy that, so keep doing it. And before we head off on our next adventure, this is our reminder that you can find links to all of our content channels at hikeandhearth.com.
And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us at Hike Hearth Birding on Instagram to keep up with everything we're doing in the field.
Okay, Dustin, I think it's about that time for you to send us and our viewers off on our next adventure, which for us is preparing for the big 4th of July cookout we'll be having at our place tomorrow. So for those of you in the States, happy Independence Day.
It sure is. Until next time, friends, keep your eyes on the skies and your hearts in the wild.
Bye, everyone.
See you soon.